This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
So you come to your last segment. You're going to come out complaining. You start ripping on the Tennessee Titans who are seated in the front row. You call yourself a champion, unlike these losers who lost in the Super Bowl, and they jump the rail, and you're attempting to fight them off before the cycles run out and you start brawling with malice as the show goes off the air. A lot to unpack here. Before we jump into the aftermath, who had the quote unquote plug to the Tennessee Titans? Did you have that relationship already, or was it someone else?
Yeah. So set it up, but yeah, Frank Wycheck, gosh. So you have to go into the WCW times when the Music City Miracle happened, and I wore the Titan shirt on TV, and then I wore the Titan shirt. Another time I went back to Buffalo. So, I'm a diehard Titan fan. They came to Nashville via Houston with a stop in Memphis, early 90s. So I had connections with the Titans, but me and Frank was a wrestling fan. And we had met each other at a Raw. I believe that's the first time we met, but we had remained friends, through it all. And again, we were just buddies, but hey man, we're doing these shows. They were in camp. And so Frank, come on down. Oh, we'd love to come on down. Later Frank wrestled at a Slammiversary. So it's been me. My relationship with Frank was the conduit to everything. The WCW days, the early TNA days. We'll get into, I called Frank for advice on the Pac-Man. That's a whole nother podcast. But Frank, me and Frank's relationship was the conduit to all of it.
It's, talk me through creatively. Does he say, Jeff, can we do something? Do you want us to do something? Or do you say hypothetically and just sort of soft pitch it out there, and then he has to run it up the flagpole? Or what's that process look like?
Well, the offensive line, and they were a unit, and coming off 2 years prior to this, I think was the Super Bowl year. Super successful later on this year. I think this is the year they went 13-3, but a really, really good offensive line. Like they blocked for Eddie George and Steve McNair, and they were the elite offensive unit and really tight. Fred Miller, Zach Pillar, Matthews. I'm gonna leave somebody out here, but anyway, Frank and his buddies, his teammates, his close teammates, were all wanting to come, and knowing the format of the show, I was like, hey, what can we do? Look, I didn't have a Sports Center moment in my mind. Maybe in the back of my mind, I've always got that there, but what can we do to just sort of spice it up, knowing the character of Jeff Jarrett is going to continue to bitch about wanting his title shot. And so I just said, hey, would you guys mind if we got into a verbal joust, and I'll shove you and you shove me back, and we'll have security. How it turned out was not anywhere close to what was discussed. The only thing that was discussed was, Frank, I'm going to shove you, and you shove me back, and then I'm going to leave you guys, and you guys sort of act like you want to. Maybe Frank, you are going to come over the rail and have your teammates pull you back, and I'll have security get in between. And I was just going to verbally jab them. But the story, what was me continuing to bitch to Tanae and West about me getting a title shot, and we go off the air with me ranting and raving. No physicality. What was booked.
Talk to me a little bit about, when you're laying all of this out. And again, I don't know, so I'm just asking. I've read that there's a lot of contracts that professional athletes have from their organization that says you can't do this, you can't do that. Is this a, hey, we should ask forgiveness rather than permission situation, as far as for the Titans?
Man, this is another good episode that Brian Urlacher, he came down, didn't ask for permission, asked for forgiveness. This, again, Wycheck, they came to the show. They're in the middle of camp. There was no plans for them to get physically involved at all. It wasn't even a thought. It certainly wasn't going to be a good idea. They weren't going to do it. I mean, it was, hey man, can you come down? I'm going to have a little verbal thing. It's going to be over and done with. So they came through the back door, and it is nothing that we laid out. That's what the story a lot of times even gets sidetracked, because there's such an assumption that, hey, you're going to lay out this Titans angle. There was nothing. There was no Titans angles. It was, hey, Jason, that's my little brother. Make sure you get them in these seats for at the end of the night, because I'm going to come over and talk trash to them. And that's it. I mean, there was no laying out of an angle or a storyline, contrary to what fiction writers may or may not write.
Oh my God.
There was no angle. Well, what are you shaking your head for?
You did it again.
I did not.
All right, so let's talk about what the Torch did right. Can't believe you. The angle with the Tennessee Titan football players got carried away, according to TNA officials. The script called for Jeff to get involved in a pushing match with the Titans players, but they were not supposed to jump over the guardrail. Once backstage, Jeff Jarrett kept cool about the confrontation by telling everyone it was not a big deal. Harley Race, who was also among those backstage, ran out to check on the situation. He told friends that it was the first time in 20 years he had to run to the ring for a shoot situation. The Titans coach, Jeff Fisher, went public against the players' involvement and said such activity would not be tolerated in the future. The Observer wrote this: Tennessee Titans offensive linemen Frank Miller and Zach Pillar hopped the rail, and there was a big skirmish, most of which was pre-planned. The segment was added by Russo, so the stories about it being a shoot aren't exactly true or untrue. Everyone in the company swears Pillar got out of control and it wasn't all scripted. The confrontation was planned. Jarrett and Pillar were supposed to shove each other, but supposedly nobody was supposed to hop the rail. A source within the football camp confirmed the story we'd heard from the wrestling side, that an angle was planned out and put together, I believe laid out by Jason Jarrett, involving shoving, but that's where it was supposed to end. The idea was for the shoving match, and the players wouldn't lose face, is that Malice would attack Jarrett and take him away while they were still there sitting. Pillar had been drinking, and most didn't feel he didn't want to be shown up, so he hopped the rail and totally overpowered Jeff like it was nothing, which isn't a position you theoretically want your top guy in unless it leads to a match or footage on SportsCenter, which, as it turned out, happened the next night. Since this group is desperate for a publicity breakthrough like that, it's very possible that this was all an inside work and that only a few people were in on, but now I'm doubting that. What is for sure is that if it was, and it was all agreed upon, virtually nobody was in on it in the company. Ron Harris, who works backstage, was about to hit the ring to save Jeff, for example. Malice, who also wasn't clued in, wasn't supposed to touch the football players and only go after Jarrett, but instead he went after the players and broke it up real fast. Russo used to pull this stuff in WCW, and it was his first night in. Pillar and the rest of the players after the angle went backstage after the show and was joking around with Jarrett. Several people saw through similar fake shoots in WCW and bought this one. It kind of felt Pillar was just drinking and got carried away, kind of ribbing on Jarrett on live TV, and that's what caused the incident. Miller claimed the whole thing was set up and that they were supposed to throw blows and make the segment look as real as possible. All-pro tight end Frank Wycheck, the tackle Jason Matthews, watched along with a third guy who jumped in. That was lineman Barry Hall, who also threw fake punches. All are big wrestling fans, and Wycheck once drove a local sports talk guy crazy when he talked about going to WrestleMania. Titans GM Floyd Reese was upset about them being involved because of the injury risk, and all the players recognize they're not allowed to follow up on the angle. The original plan was not to build a match out of the confrontation, but when it got so much publicity, there was talk the next day of seeing if they could do something, because it's the kind of publicity this company desperately needs. Miller claimed he felt honored that people were calling it a shoot, but it wasn't, that it was staged, and he wanted to make sure nobody would be hurt. However, one of the players involved privately said nobody was supposed to jump the rail, but Pillar and Miller did. So lots to unpack here. What was planned? What wasn't planned? Talk us through it.
Oh man, Conrad, you know, as a fan, when you try to mansplaining.
Yep.
You try to explain why we love professional wrestling.
This is it.
Because you just can't put your, like, there's no way that, that really happened. This is one of those incidences that to this day, it's why I love our industry, because you can't script it. You can't deliver it. We're still talking about it. The things that came out of it, everybody's positioning. I love Fred Miller saying, "Oh, it was supposed to happen." That is, let me cover for my teammate's ass.
Of course.
You can just look at all the, now we're talking 20 years later, but when it happened, and here's something that I believe a fan just jumped AEW recently, and there's chatter about that. But look, through the years, being a heel, I could tell you story after story after story that no matter how much you tell people to their, like, just really calm, like, I'm going to come do this, or this is going to happen here. But in the heat of the moment, when I looked at my buddy, Zach Pillar, when I looked him in the eye, and you can go back and look at the tape and hear all this, but when I laid the words in, I'm a winner and you're a loser and you choked at the Super Bowl.
Oh,
that cut so deep to those guys because they were on the field and they were 1 yard short.
Yes.
So, and definitely wrongly so. But the weight of the loss at the Super Bowl, I'm sure stuck in their craw. I mean, they were a great year, great team. But when I said that line, Zach, and rumor and innuendo, hypothetically, he might have had a couple of cocktails and dipped the canoe early that afternoon. But my brother, Jason, is the one who got in their seats. But when I said that, Zach just couldn't take it. And I'll say this, God rest Jerry Toots' soul, Malice. If the chips are down and you got somebody to watch your back, you go back, folks, and do the watch along. He knocked the hell out of Fred Miller. And Fred, if that was scripted, because if it was, then because I thought about that back then. If it was all scripted, Fred, you just put yourself in a position to Jerry. Look, I'm maybe 220. Toot was 280 and blindsided him like a chop block, like he ain't never been hit before. So the whole thing just got completely out of hand because Zach, and you can watch the tape back, it's like, oh man, he's really, oh no, Zach, don't do this. Don't do this. Oh, he's over the rail. And we're going, I'm like, I mean, yes, you ever been manhandled? That guy, I mean, because I'm like, is he really doing this? And then, okay, I'm going to try to drive him back in the ring. And he's a 300-pound guy. I take my knee and try to put it in his privates. You can look at that on Twitter as well, just to try to like, Zach, stop. And then Miller piled over. And then it just got completely out of hand. I'm like, this is, oh my God. And then the dressing room emptied and Jerry Toot blasted ass, and you'll see him. He wanted to grab me and say, let's go. And he got me and we got the hell out of there. And Harley came down and the whole dressing room emptied. And it was a wild melee. And Ron Harris and others, they didn't know what was going on because like they knew that wasn't supposed to happen. But again, I go back to what I originally said. It's one of those things that happens in our industry that you go, man, that was great. I don't care if it was scripted or not scripted. It was great, entertaining TV. But when we got to the back, me and Wycheck knew shit's going down. It was not a good scene. I'll stop there and let you ask questions. You're running the show here, but
no.
We knew immediately that damage control for those guys. It's not a good scene. In my brain, I'm thinking, Dixie, boy, have we got a clip to service now. Let's run with it. On our side, it was a grand slam. I knew that. But on my personal side with Frank and the Titans and Floyd Reese and the positioning, I knew then. I said, this ain't good for those guys at all.
So you said something there we need to circle back to. You said, oh, I knew we had something for Dixie. Dixie, we got, well, what was Dixie doing for you at the time? Because Dixie's not an owner at this point.
So this was maybe her third show ever. and the Tennessee Titans, obviously, a national franchise in the NFL. And we've got a clip of their players getting involved with our whole roster. And it's out of season for the NFL. So they don't have excuse me, they don't have highlights to play. This is a clip that immediately will be serviced to every NFL beat writer and talk show host and Sports Center host and whatever it is. It was a clip that, not because it was such a great clip, although it really is a good clip. It's because it was out of season in talk. There's only so many things you can show with an out route at preseason. This was some action that you could talk over. It was immediately newsworthy. And Dixie was the PR agent.
Tremendous stuff. You started to say, we got backstage and Frank Wycheck, tell us what the mood is afterwards backstage.
And Frank could not quit apologizing enough. Like he just oh my God, Jeff, I'm so sorry. I mean, look, Zach tossed me around like a dish rack. I mean, I'm not ashamed to say that at all. He's in shape, in camp, offensive lineman who, I was at the end of my workday, and let's just say Zach was just getting his party started, or his party was in midstream, and he was amped up, and he tossed me around, and it got wild. And Frank, smart guy, he knew that the whole dressing room emptied, and that wasn't supposed to happen. He knew that, and Frank probably took it a little bit too far in his mind, that they disrupted the entire show when we went off there. Frank wasn't seasoned or skilled enough to know, shit, we just gave them a hell of a segment. So just like, Frank, it's cool. We're good. But, Zach's in trouble. And look, Zach was 7 sheets and feeling no pain and loving it and hugging and high-fiving. And I'm sure Fred Miller, being the astute gentleman that he is, like, oh boy, because he was the captain, if I recall, he was the captain of the team, so he's supposed to be leadership, lead by example. It was such a beautiful mess in so many directions. But backstage, I was happy from a businessman, but I knew Frank, those guys were going to have a discussion, and I was very hopeful. Where can this go PR wise? But again, let's just pump the brakes. It's a spice up angle that had really nothing to do as far as quote unquote drawing money the following week, but it was great publicity for a startup company.
We heard Dave Meltzer say, oh, this sort of worked, shoot shit. This is what Russo did. And look, he did it in his first night here. None of that's real, right? That's just jumping to conclusions.
Don't get mad at me. You promise you that's complete fiction. What happened was, I'll say this from experience. What happened was when I tell you this, a direct result of too much alcohol.
Yeah, I was going to say it's alcohol. Yeah.
Yes, it's a direct result.
But my God, you knew as it's happening, I'm sure you're thinking, boy, if I can get out of this not hurt, this is going to be big.
Yeah, no, that is what I thought. I was so happy to see Jerry, and to the day he died, because he laughed and cut up, but he's like, he knew, look, he said he was sitting there watching the monitor. He's a football fan. He knew when Zach stumbled coming over the deal, Zach was pissed. You can go, Zach was not happy. Is he going to beat me up? No, but he didn't like me saying this, so he's going to have some fun with it.
Well, and also too, he doesn't, wrestling, again, I don't know shit about wrestling, but wrestling is sort of built on trust between two professionals. I can trust you with my body type deal. This guy's never trained for any of that. The only thing he's been trained to do is inflict pain for real.
He tossed me like a rag doll. Wall said it. He says, I knew when he slung you. You can watch. It didn't. Jerry's coming from a monitor backstage down the ramp, out and around the ring. But it was. Tell you what, I've said it many, many times. He's the guy you want on your side when the chips are down, because he stepped right up and went to war. But it was
and by the way, again, I appreciate this is not supposed to be part of the show, and you hit a motherfucker with a chair.
You love that, don't you? It was total chaos. I'll say this: my Moondog Battle Royals from 1990 and 91 came in handy, because I immediately tried to do my best recovery and get away and find the closest chair and start swinging it.
from the torch here. The incident with the Titans garnered TNA quite a bit of mainstream publicity. Several newscasts across the country showed clips of the incident with some mentioning the TNA Wednesday night program. A late night West Coast edition of ESPN Sports Center also showed the clip, and several newspapers also mentioned the incident. The publicity from this, in a weird way, is one of the most important things that ever happened to TNA. Fair to say?
Absolutely fair to say.
So let's talk about what the reaction and reception was locally. Obviously, when you've got an NFL football team doing something, again, to your point, in off season, and I just want to add a little more context to that. Like great friend of the show, Cole Kubelik, just started a new morning show in Birmingham with former Alabama quarterback Greg McElroy, and they're on the big sports station there in Birmingham, the Jocks. Here's the gimmick, though. People who are listening to that show in Birmingham, guess what they want to talk about in July? Same thing they want to talk about in January and in April and in September. Football. There's only so much of that content you can literally fish out of thin air when nobody's practicing, nobody's negotiating contracts. There's no game to recap last night. There's no game coming up 5 days from now. So you're just searching for content. And this becomes the topic of conversation on sports talk radio nationwide, but it has to be at a fever pitch in Nashville. And of course, in Nashville, everybody listens to 104.5 The Zone. Back then, I don't think 102.5 The Game was around, but it at the time was arguably, I don't even think it's arguable, it was the largest sports station in the country as far as the percentage of the audience that listened to that station. And here you are in the middle of it, the hometown team at a hometown show. And now it's being discussed on the biggest radio show around. It's a big doggone deal locally, right?
Huge. And you have to live in Nashville to sort of understand the sports placement in the community, because prior to the Titans and the Predators, we were a college town. Vanderbilt, there's a local, Lipscomb and Belmont, some schools some folks have never heard of, but it was lots of college basketball, lots of college football, just college sports all around. Early 90s, the Titans come on board, huge. Then the Preds, and that was a game changer. 2 sports franchises in a town that never had it. The college scene was still hot. And so, we're also Music City, so lots of music everywhere. But the sports talk station created that niche. There's a guy named George Plaster. There were some names that were just household names. And then, like you said, we're coming off of any NFL cities out there realize when you get to the Super Bowl and don't win, and it's your first time there and only time, it was just huge news. And this was the core of the team. Really looking forward to the season to come. It was just Titans own the city in so many different ways. It was front page of the Nashville, the Tennessean, our local paper. It was every talk show, just a buzz going around, obviously before Twitter and all that. But I mean, everywhere you went, that was the talk of the town, in such a, I don't want to say a positive way, but it was so newsworthy. Nobody got hurt. Hey, there's our guys. That's our offensive line. They're together as a unit. And the sort of the byline, or not a lot of, it was the clip, but oh man, the Titans went down to the wrestling and kicked everybody's ass. That's sort of the story that came out of it.
Yeah.
If you watch the clip, okay, it was a little brawl, but as the story grew in stature, it was the Titans offensive line. It's the fish story.
Yeah.
By the end of the story, they beat up the entire locker room and came out victorious, and their coaches are mad, but man, we can't wait till game 1. I mean, it's that deal.
So talk to me a little bit about, well, before we talk about that, I do want to just add context to what we're talking about. You want to talk about highs and lows. I think you should go start a wrestling company if you really want to experience them. You're on a high because this is the way you close the show. You've got Super Bowl athletes getting involved. You're going to be all over every newspaper, radio station, whatever, every sports section around, even Sports Center, which at the time is a lot bigger than it is now.
Yeah.
And you're 1 week removed from being told, oh yeah, you haven't made any money. In fact, you've lost it all. We had our numbers wrong. That's 1 week apart. Like oh God, I'm destitute. We've lost all of our money. What are we going to do? Shit. We got to cut every cost we can, man, baby. We just got to get a life raft and get out of here. Holy shit. I'm on ESPN and everywhere else 7 days later. That's unbelievable, Jeff.
Yeah. Wow. When you put it in that context, and that was, well, it just sort of, I can't even say that. It just goes with the territory of growing up in this wacky business. But no, it was something that my upbringing, I will say that. And look, hindsight's 2020 and looking back to over 20 years ago, but knowing I'm in it for the long haul. This is prior to the Scrushy situation.
Let's talk about that. I know we're going to circle back at some point. Scrushy's still involved. Are you having conversations with him about the Titans? Does he send you a text? Do you give him a call?
I don't know, say the next day, but we certainly sent him the clip and, hey, this is what your investment it did, that type. Here's the buzz out of it, but not making it because, I didn't know what was to come out of this angle. I really thought, okay, we did it, the following day and we're going to milk it. But by the time the next show came around, we're not getting the Titans in a match. We had moved on. I didn't know how it was going to play into the future of TNA, which we'll get to when you want to. But at that point, it was, okay, great angle, great spice up. It wasn't even formatted, but the story of Jeff bitching about not getting a title shot, that was another layer of the onion that we can add to it. But let's move on and let's get into we're moving to the fairgrounds. We got to build out that studio. And Keith Mitchell, you got to make sure, I'm in those conversations on how we're going to shoot the studio versus Municipal Auditorium. And, there were so many other things going on and talent coming in. And, obviously our budgets, we were trying to figure that out. It's going to go weekly. I mean, there were so many different things on the horizon. I didn't really, not that I should have, soak in the moment, but by probably 48 hours, by the following Monday or Tuesday, the Titan story was over and gone. So the high was over by the weekend.
Such a great story. I know it's another TNA story, but I just love, the behind the scenes of how all of this came to be and how if one little thing didn't happen, it might not happen. I mean, let's appreciate again, the context of the timing here. A week ago, we have the rug pulled out from under us on the whole TNA. We were lied to about the number of pay-per-view buys, Jay Hossman story. Now we do this Tennessee Titans thing that we think will be a nice little way to go off the air. And oh my God, it doesn't go according to plan and things are real scary for a minute, but wait a minute, we lived and it's everywhere. And then we fast forward a few more weeks and hey, now not only did you not sell as many pay-per-views as you could have or thought you did, but your funding's gone. Your angel investor is gone. And somehow this crazy Tennessee Titans thing is the thing that perhaps saves the company. I mean, in hindsight, because that is the thing, you never know when you're quote unquote pitching, when you're selling, what's somebody's hot button? What are they going to bite on? What's going to get this deal done? What's their angle? What are they interested in? If we know what you're interested in, then it's easier to, cater our pitch and sell you. But if we don't know, now we've just sort of got to guess. And I'm curious if the Titans thing hadn't happened, it's not necessarily a lock that Bob Carter would have bit, right?
So coming in to sit down, and I'm trying to do my best to be a good podcaster, if you will, Conrad, because you're going to bring heat. You're going to. So I really have tried to be prepared and the what ifs. But I think there's two things that really go into, look, the father-daughter relationship goes without saying, but the Titans thing, being able to the context that all that happened in the Municipal Auditorium and all that. So that happened in July, but we literally had 6 weeks And if you think about going into the meeting with the Carters, how we literally said, okay, here's a budget, about $100,000 a week. Okay, so that's 5.2 million a year if we don't make anything. And I'm really brushing over broad numbers, but it happened in July in a municipal auditorium. It gave us around a month to manage our costs, get in a fixed studio. Mr. Carter, here's the blueprint of what we're spending over the next year. And so walking in with all the sizzle of Titans and Toby and all that, but wow, the NFL really checked the box with Bob, but also the managed cost, the fixed cost. Here we want to get into this space and look, here's the comparable of WWE. It's really fascinating to look back on all these years later and see the role that and the timing, because just the timing of everything. It's really fascinating.
I am curious. I'll let you go the whole episode without busting your balls about it, but I am curious.
Here we go.
Do you feel a little guilty all these years later showing WWE as a comparable?
Oh gosh, no. No.
Okay.
Absolutely not. Let me ask you, do you think Tony Khan went to Shad and didn't show WWE as a comparable?
I don't think Tony Khan pitched WWE as a comparable now.
Okay. Interesting.
I don't know that.
Yeah. It's a point of reference to a non-wrestling person. How else do you lay out a financial?
No, I get that. But the idea that you feel like, because when we're saying comparable in the mortgage and real estate and appraisal business, we shorten it to comp. If you're going to use WWE as a comp, you're almost insinuating, now this is what's possible.
Oh, no. Okay. Let me clarify that, because even in deep discussions as the days and months went along, is that we used in a lot of references a 10-to-1. WWE.
I see. So they would be 10x. So if we're going to hope to do 10% of what they're doing.
Yes.
Okay.
I never went outside the box and say we're going to be number one ever in my history. I never said then, and I always sort of classified it or cached it with Vince as you can say what it is. A 40-year head start is when his father's promotion, or WrestleMania 1 was his head start, whatever it is, just ingrained in the cable television industry, the pay-per-view industry, whatever it may be, a gigantic
Head start.
And not just head start. It's that they're first in the space in so many ways. But the comparable being, and I use this a lot of times, the different revenue streams. We can have the same amount of revenue streams, just subtract 4 or 5 zeros. That's what I told Bob, and Bob asked about. Never we were going to be equal.
I got you. So this is how you make money in wrestling, but we're going to make a fraction of what they do. That makes sense to me.
Yes, for sure.
Well, listen, this has been fun. I don't know why, but I think I enjoyed this better than some of our more recent episodes, because I'm just fascinated with the whole what if piece of the entire industry. And this is a big one.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at savewithconrad.com.